Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Welcome to another D&D Buyer's Guide video. Today I'm going to be ranking the 5 official D&D 5th edition campaign setting books in order from my least favorite to my most favorite. Now this is a personal ranking. This is not meant to be the definitive order that, these should be looked at in. It's based completely and totally on my own subjective opinion. So don't take, like I said, if your favorite setting book is at the bottom of my list or near the bottom of my list, don't take it personally. We're all entitled to our own opinions. I'll do my best to explain my reasoning for it. And again, feel free to share your opinions, your rankings in the comment section below. Just keep it respectful because we're all going to have our own different outlooks. We're all going to have our own different preferences. And that's okay. If my least favorite book is your most favorite book, then that's awesome because, you're getting use out of it. And I want each of these books to be a success. I would never wish failure on any of these products, even if I don't personally care for them. So with that in mind, let's just get right into it, shall we? And coming in at number 5 is the very first campaign setting book to come out for D&D 5th edition. We are looking at the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. This released in November of 2015, and it was actually a few years between the release of this book and the next book to come out chronologically. So for a long time, this was the only campaign setting book to come out, and it, to me at least, was a huge disappointment. This is a great book for people that are just getting into D&D now, which with 5th edition, there are a lot of people that are introduced to tabletop RPGs with this rule set. They don't, have any access to the older campaign setting books, or they don't have their own predetermined thoughts on what you were hoping the book would include. So, for beginners, this is a great book to have because most of the campaigns that take place in 5th edition D&D are based on the Sword Coast region. The reason that I have issues with this book is there's a couple of things. So number one, it's just the Sword Coast region. The Forgotten Realms campaign setting is a pretty big setting. There's all kinds of interesting locations that you could explore, and there's more to it than just the narrow strip of land that they seem to be focusing on with all of their campaigns. I would love to see locations like Thay, like the Shining South, like Cormyr, places like that. I would really love to see them, focused on or have something that you could look at and start to plan adventures in. Unfortunately, we just haven't really gotten that. So this book, again, for that reason, was sort of a disappointment. It's also a very thin book. It's the thinnest of all the campaign source books that have come out so far, at only about 160 pages. And it just nothing about it was anything that I was really that I really enjoyed. I think I may have been really easy on it when I first did my review on it, because there were so few books for 5th edition D&D at the time that, anything coming out was a welcome thing. But honestly, I was just hoping for more. I was hoping for more of the Forgotten Realms setting. I was just hoping for more out of this book. And I have not looked through this book. I haven't read through it since probably about 2-3 months after it came out. So this book has sat on my shelf for years as part of my collection, but I haven't cracked the cover. I haven't gone to look through to read anything in it for a very, very long time. So the fact that it's been years and I've had no interest in revisiting this book, it just by default had to be at the bottom of this list. So that's why it comes in at number 5. Coming in at number 4, and forgive me for this, but again, my own personal opinions, is The Explorer's Guide to Wildmont. So this is the Critical Role tie-in campaign setting book, based on the ongoing Critical Role series, at least at the time that this came out. I will say as a caveat, I don't watch Critical Role. I don't really have any knowledge of the Critical Role campaigns or stories or any of the things that have been going on in it. I'm not against it. I don't hate it. I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, there are some people I've seen that have argued that Critical Role is one of the worst things to happen to D&D. I don't believe that at all. I think it's, if it draws people's attention to it and it gets people that otherwise may not have picked up the books or, gotten into the hobby, if it gets people into it, then it's a positive thing. And I think that Matt Mercer is an incredible dungeon master, and I think he's a fantastic ambassador for the D&D brand. So this is nothing against Critical Role or Matt Mercer or anything like that. The reason that this book came in as low as it is because it just didn't really grab my interest with anything in there. It felt like a homebrew setting, which it is, and that's fine because that's what it is. But it just, I don't know, it felt like things were sort of thrown together. And, when you're building a campaign setting, a homebrew one, a lot of times that's what happens. You want a region that has certain geographic traits to it, and well, you haven't gone here yet, so you throw that in there. You wanted an assortment of gods, then you sort of do that. Like you can just cherry pick whichever ones that you want to have involved, and that's fine. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. It just doesn't interest me personally. The one thing that I will say felt like a really sort of big disappointment or a missed opportunity was the fact that this was supposed to be a campaign setting set in a region that is torn by war. And I was really looking forward to see how they presented war in this book. I was hoping for like mass battles or mass combat information. I was hoping that there would be sort of an exploration of the horrors of war. And it might be touched on a little bit, but it just really sort of fails to capture just how awful things can be, like some of the things you might come across. And looking at like the age category range, I've been watching a lot of Star Trek Deep Space Nine lately, and the later seasons really do tackle war in a very, mature and, a very captivating way, but they don't shy away from how it can affect people and how it can change people and, just the horrors that you may experience. And, I know that, it's a product that's meant to appeal to a broad range, but it felt like that was something that should be included because it's a campaign setting based in a land that is, where there's war happening or on the verge of, or, sort of in a ceasefire sort of time period maybe, but, war is a major thing. And it just didn't capture that for me, which was, again, disappointing because that's what I was hoping for out of this book. You also lack key NPCs, and other campaign setting books sort of do that as well. But again, in a campaign setting where there's conflicts and there's war going on, political leaders would make for an excellent target for high-level characters to go up against. And they're just not in here. So you have to do the work yourself, which again is fine if you're, someone who's comfortable doing that. But, I've heard the fact that they weren't included was a decision made to protect the ongoing story. So that you could have, like their introduction in the story could be like this big thing, or you wouldn't give away the abilities that they had, things like that, which is fine. I think they could have done a workaround where they gave just different builds for what you want them to be. Like, if they were a martial character or a spellcaster or whatever, you could have given them options to use, I think. But it just felt like there was just nothing substantial about like including those NPCs that it could have been a big thing. You could have had like a campaign closing scenario where you're going after one of these leaders. It just felt like, again, missed opportunity. And the other thing about this, why it's ranked number 4 for me, is because when I was looking through it, there was nothing in the book that I looked at and said, I want to incorporate that into my own games, which sometimes campaign setting books are great for. They could have a mechanic or an aspect to them that you want to cherry pick and put into your own games. There was just nothing in this book that did that for me. It's a well-written book, and I think overall it's a competent campaign setting that I think people could really enjoy building adventures in, especially if you're fans of Critical Role, because you sort of know some of the stories that have been told. So you could set your campaigns to sort of revolve around some of these things where the characters might be, sort of on the periphery of the major events, and that's fine. It just doesn't do anything for me personally, so that's why it's at number 4. And coming in at number 3 is a campaign setting book that I'm not interested in the setting so much as one aspect or mechanic or system that's introduced in it that I do want to incorporate into a D&D campaign, and that is the Mythic Odysseys of Theros. So again, probably going to irk a lot of people that I ranked a Magic the Gathering setting over the Critical Role setting, and I apologize, but this is my own personal opinion. So Mythic Odysseys of Theros is sort of like a Greek mythology type of campaign setting, and explores things like the the underworld and like the gods of the underworld, and all those different things that you sort of have, like hydras and satyrs. There's a lot of cool stuff in there, but As much as, it's another well-written book, I'm not interested in the setting itself so much as I am in the devotion mechanic. So one of the things I've always wanted to do is have characters that are chosen of a particular god or cause or ideology or something. In fact, and I hope this doesn't spoil anything, but there is my current 5th edition D&D game where I'm considering actually imparting some of those abilities onto one of the player characters, because they do champion their god whenever they get the opportunity to, and try to spread that god's influence, even if it's in a realm that they're not native to. So, I'm considering doing that. But this book has examples of the different Theros gods and what being devoted to them can do for you in terms of benefits. It also gives you storylines and quests that the gods may give you, which are things that you could easily cherry pick and make adventures of yourself as well. But just having a mechanic that you can use to determine how devoted a character is to their god, and once they get a certain amount of devotion points, they get some abilities that they can use granted by their god. That's something that I want to incorporate into a game. So because there was that one thing that I really want to use in future campaigns, is why I've ranked this book at number 3. The setting itself is, again, interesting. It's well written. It's just not one that I plan on running personally. Greek mythology it's something that I'm passively interested in, but not enough to want to run an entire campaign. But the devotion system is something that I would absolutely use and want to use and will incorporate at some point, hopefully in the very near future. So that's why I had to rank it at number 3. Coming in at number 2 is the other Magic the Gathering setting, the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. Now, I was really outspoken against this thing when it first came out. I'm not going to shy away from that. I'm not going to pretend that that wasn't the case. It is what it is. There are videos where I explain why I had no interest in the book. And the only thing I can say is that, with the passage of time, with that being, a glaring hole in my 5th edition collection, and with an opportunity to purchase the book at $20, brand new from a major bookstore, due to a sale and reward points that were built up, that's why I ended up picking this book up. I didn't really have high expectations for it when I first got it. Again, I was really against having it in the first place, but when I finally did pick it up, I started looking through it, and I started to actually really enjoy what I was reading. The Ravnica setting being this massive city that engulfs the better part of the planet that it's on was an interesting concept, and the rivalries between the various guilds was also something that I really liked, and the guilds were really well presented. So each guild, gives you some thorough information about how to join them, what their goals are, and it gives you contacts, it gives you rivals, it gives you some adventure ideas, these quests that you can go on. There was just a lot of really well thought out stuff when it came to those factions. You could easily reskin this campaign setting of Ravnica and turn it into Sigil if you wanted to run a Planescape adventure like back in the days of 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. I know Planescape was a very popular setting, and Ravnica might be the closest we ever get to it. Sigil, it was this large sprawling city that was sort of self-contained, so you could, again, easily port Ravnica over to that. In Sigil, you had these factions that were working against one another. Maybe not openly in war with one another, although there were certainly conflicts. So again, you could reskin the various guilds in here and turn them into some of the factions that you would have had in Planescape, which is at first what I wanted to do with this book. But as I read more of it, I just started to actually like the setting itself. I like the guilds as they're presented, and I was actually working on a Ravnica campaign, or was going to start thinking of a Ravnica campaign right before the pandemic hit. So this was a campaign setting that I was actively going to use and run adventures in. So, that's the first one of the books that I presented so far that I could say that about. So it had to be high on the list for that reason. So I know the Magic the Gathering thing is very divisive in the D&D community, and that's fine. Again, your opinions are what they are. The only thing I would say is actually give the book a chance. Even if it just means if you know someone that has it, flipping through it or maybe reading through it, asking to borrow it, and like making your own opinions based on actually going through them. Because this one I think was really well done, and it surprised me. It really genuinely surprised me, and because of that, and because I wanted to start running games there, it had to be at least number 2 on this list. Now, number 1, probably not a surprise to anyone, is Eberron, Rising from the Last War. So I've been an Eberron fan since about a year after it came out. Eberron was another one of those things when it first was announced that I was really not interested in. I was against, and I had no desire to buy it until I started actually reading an Eberron book, and then liked it enough that I went out and got the entire set of the 3rd edition or 3.5 Eberron campaign books. But anyway, so I've been a big fan of Eberron for a very long time, and believe it or not, the Eberron campaign setting is like 17 years old now, or about to be 17 years old. I think it came out in 2004, if I recall correctly. So yeah, it's been around for a while, 16, 17 years. So it's been around. This is the 3rd iteration of the Eberron campaign setting. So we had 3.5, 4th edition, and now we have the 5th edition book. The one thing that I will say that I absolutely love about the Eberron campaign setting is it has one of the most diverse set of just things going on. I don't know how else to describe it. It's late at night. I'm really tired. I'm trying my best here, but there's just like any kind of campaign that you want to run in an Eberron or in a D&D setting, you can run an Eberron. If you wanted a campaign that's based on like political intrigue or corporate intrigue, you can do that. If you wanted to create a campaign based on like tomb raiding or dungeon crawling, you can do that. If you wanted a campaign based on like these abominations that are, you know, coming from beyond the veil, you can do that. You want a campaign based on apocalyptic prophecy and the player character's attempts to prevent that from coming to pass, like you can do that. Any kind of story that you want to tell works in an Eberron setting without really having to adjust anything. It's just so much of stuff is provided for you. The one thing I will say, because there is so much going on, with like the Inspired, with the Day of Mourning, with the Last War, with the Dragon-marked houses, the Draconic Prophecy, the Ruins of Zendrick. There's so much going on in the Eberron campaign setting that it can feel a little overwhelming. My best advice is to focus on the parts of the book that interest you the most and just disregard the rest. You know, you don't, if you're not interested in the dragon marks, for example, or the dragon marked houses, then you don't have to include them. Like, you can just omit them and focus on something else. So there's just so much that you can do with the Eberron campaign setting, and it's been one of my favorite settings for well over a decade now, almost closing in on 2 decades. So, you know, I was happy to see it reach physical form in D&D 5th edition. And again, this was a campaign setting that I actually was preparing to run, and actually had an outline for what I wanted to do, and actually had a session 0 for character generation at my local game store right before the pandemic hit and everything shut down. So this was a setting that I was absolutely going to use. So, you know, as opposed to one that I was planning on using or hoping to use, this is one that I was actually already using. In fact, I'd even used it or even run some scenarios in Eberron, I think even before the book actually came out. I just took my 3rd edition or 4th edition campaign setting book with me to run. So I was using Eberron already in 5th edition, and this book is just, it's really well done. Again, I think it does an excellent job covering the basics, and I would love to see more come out for it. However, there are a number of the 3rd edition source books that have things like the Dragon Marked Houses and the 5 Nations, stuff like that you can get from DM's Guild on their like print-on-demand service, or even just the PDFs if you're interested in that. So if you're looking for just extra source material to use to flesh out your campaign settings, a lot of the flavor text from those earlier editions hasn't changed, so you can use that if you wanted to. So that is something that is worth pointing out as well. But I love the Eberron campaign, and I absolutely love this book, and so for that reason it had to be number 1 on my list. But let me know in the comments below, what are some of your favorite official D&D 5th edition settings? Again, I didn't focus on like the third-party stuff because I don't own the third-party stuff. I might look at that at some point in the near future. It's hard to say. But yeah, let me know what your personal rankings are. If there's any of these campaign setting books that you've been using in your home games, let me know that in the comments as well. Because I always love to hear everybody else's experiences with these things. But yeah, let me know what your rankings are. Let me know what some of the campaign settings that you'd like to see from D&D's past get revisited like Eberron was. Because that's always a good a great conversation as well. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. Again, keep it respectful in the comments. We're all entitled to our own preferences and opinions, and I will see you next time. Take care.